Bonjour, Grüezi, buongiorno, buondì, and hello to everyone. We hope you and your families are all safe, healthy, and well. My name is Jacques Pitlou, and it is my honor to serve as the ambassador of Switzerland to the United States of America here in Washington, D.C. Thank you for participating in the June edition of our new monthly series, the Swiss Film Club. We are grateful for your continued interest in Switzerland and Swiss culture, and we welcome this opportunity to continue sharing and engaging with you. We hope you enjoy this unique opportunity to see great Swiss films with which you may not be familiar, and to have a moment of shared viewership with your fellow participants, especially now when we cannot have those experiences in cinemas. This is also a fantastic chance to connect with and support the vibrant film industry in Switzerland, inviting the talented and creative producers, directors, writers, actors and actresses, and everyone involved in these productions to share the results of their work. The Embassy of Switzerland maintains its strong belief in culture as the ultimate connector, and it commits to continue building cross-cultural connections when we need them more than ever. This month, in honor of celebration of Pride, we are featuring the Swiss documentary Madame, directed by Stéphane Riethauser. This moving film follows the director and his grandmother's stories in parallel, as both encounter barriers because of their identities and challenge the taboos of gender and sexuality. The subject of this film is particularly relevant today, as we have seen recent political movements related to LGBTQ equality in both Switzerland and the US. In 2015, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the Constitution guarantees a right to same-sex marriage, but the work still continues. Earlier this month, the United States Supreme Court ruled that gay, lesbian, and transgender employees are protected from discrimination based on sex identity. In February 2020, a referendum in Switzerland successfully made discrimination based on sexual orientation and identity illegal. Furthermore, just a few weeks ago, the Swiss Lower Chamber moved forward with a bill on gay marriage, the closest marriage equality has ever come to being legalized in Switzerland. While these developments are incredibly important, there is still work to be done to build a society that is more inclusive and equitable and promotes the respect for human rights that is enshrined in the Swiss Constitution. With that in mind, I hope you were moved by and maybe even learned something from this wonderful film. I look forward to hearing from Mr. Riethauser, and now enjoy the discussion.
Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the Embassy of Switzerland, I want to thank you for joining us for the second installment in our new monthly Swiss Film Club. My name is Emily Buss, and I work in the public diplomacy section at the Embassy. This film club was started during this time when we're unable to gather in cinemas to create moments of shared viewership and to continue sharing with our American audiences excellent Swiss films and supporting Swiss film artists in Switzerland as they share their work. This month's film, Madame, was selected for the June Film Club in honor of Pride, and we were glad to see there was so much interest in it. We had almost 400 viewers for the film so far, and it's still available. I'm delighted to be joined today for this discussion by the film's director, Stéphane Riethauser. He was born in Geneva, and he holds a law degree from the University of Geneva. And over the years, he has worked as a teacher, an activist, a photographer, editor, journalist, and translator. He worked for the Swiss radio television RTS as a journalist and director. And in 2007, he launched his production company Lambda Prod and started working as an independent filmmaker. He is also the author of A Visage Découvert, a photography book about coming out, and has directed a number of other films, including Frozen in Time and Garden of Stars. This film, Madame, has garnered much acclaim. It was nominated for Best Documentary at the 2020 Swiss Film Awards and has been shown at festivals around the world. So I'm looking forward to hearing your insights, Stéphane, and hearing your answers to our questions. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'll begin with a very straightforward question, which is, what was your inspiration for telling these two stories, and specifically telling them in this very unique way?
Well, my grandmother was my inspiration. She is the core of everything. She was a great inspiration in my life. And I started filming her when she turned 90 years old. This was already 20 years ago. And I started filming her with a little camera that she had given me for Christmas. And she had such an interesting life. She's a flamboyant personality. And I wanted to record her in order not to forget all the stories she was telling me when I was paying her a visit. So I started gathering this material, but I had no intention of turning this into a film, actually, back then. And it's a very long process, but basically I filmed her on a regular basis in some everyday situations. And then she passed away when she was 95 years old. This was in 2004. And actually, I had never looked at the material that I had gathered. And it's only 10 years after her death, finding myself between two projects. One of them was not being financed. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to look at these old tapes. And there I found some incredible materials, some little sequences that I thought maybe could be funny, could be tender, could be also maybe relevant. And I started editing a sort of biography, a filmed biography of my grandmother, gathering all the material that I could gather. And this was not really to my satisfaction. And to make a long story short, over the course of the research process, I came upon material that showed me on screen. All these Super 8 films that my father had made of me, my brother, my mother, and everything. And I saw that maybe I could tell something about gender. I wanted to do something about the condition of women incarnated by my grandmother. And a good friend of mine, she's my fiercest critic, actually, had a look at the first version of the editing and said, your grandmother is a great character, but where is your point of view? If you want to say something about the condition of women, about sexism, about what she had to go through, maybe you have to say something about your own life. If you want to talk about women, then you have to talk about men also. And your condition as a gay boy in the closet back then, what was your education like? And then it sort of tilted in my mind. I was like, okay, I actually did not have the intention of putting myself into that film. I only wanted to do something about my grandmother. And this is also why it's still called Madame. This title refers, of course, to her, but also to my relationship to women in general, to her, and also my feminine size. And as you might have seen in the movie, I grew up with a very specific view on women. I grew up in a very sexist, by default, sexist education without really being conscious of what it meant. And this is an attempt to share the story of my grandmother as well as mine and try to say something about the norms and the values that define our genders, culturally speaking.
Right. And I would imagine that this is the most personal film you've made. So did that make it easier or more difficult? And were you nervous about sharing these personal stories?
I was very nervous, yes. And over the course of the production process, I started this project in 2014. And the film was completed in December of 2018. So it's 4.5 years. In the meantime, I had to stop production twice because I ran out of money. So I made 2 other films in the meantime. It's always like that in the independent film business. But it was frightening in a way to disclose so many intimate stories. But at the same time, I thought, I want to tell a true story. I want to try to move the audiences. And it is only when you go personal that you manage to find somebody's heart. If not the mind, the heart, try to touch people with an emotional story that also says something about who we are. And I was a little bit anxious about the reaction that my parents could have, or all the other people that I put into the movie, at first without their consent. All my friends back then in my school years and everything. So I, of course, asked every single person for their authorization to have them in the film. To my great surprise, everybody agreed. I was a little bit anxious about my parents also, but finally they thought it was a great film, even though it's a summary of our lives. Everything that I say in this film is absolutely true, but I don't say everything. So there are gaps that you are not really conscious of. But I wanted to tell the story the way I experienced it, but also in a film that lasts 90 minutes. You cannot say everything. So I had to focus on some aspects, and I was saying the film is not really fair with my dad nor with my mother, because you could have the impression that my mother was just a good little housewife baking apple pie and that's it. She also had an incredible career as a translator and interpreter. She was making more money than my dad did when they met back in the 60s. I don't mention all these things in the film because it didn't serve the story. I had to focus on the story between my grandmother and myself, between a grandmother and a grandson. And I tried to look at the characters this way, although I knew it was me, of course, and people of my family and friends, but I always tried to take as much distance as possible in order to consider them as characters and use them for the purpose of a narration. And hopefully that's what I could achieve. But in the end, I was amazed at the good reviews, and also in my inner circle, in my close circle of friends and family, everybody loved the movie. A lot of people said, well, this is, daring and what you say. I don't have the impression of disclosing too much. Thank God I have a little more secrets. I didn't say everything about my life, but I really, the core question for me was to try to be as honest, as authentic as possible. And even if I would come off a little stupid from that scene, or I think it's only by being honest and telling about your mistakes, telling about your life as it really was, and not trying to make it as you want it to be, that I could maybe touch the heart of the audience.
That's great. This is a good transition to my next question, and you sort of touched on it briefly, that the film is made up almost entirely of archival footage, and that's an advantage of your family's interest and passion for filming and for film. And I imagine it was a daunting task to go through all of this. So my first question is, how long did it take to put everything together? You sort of talked about how long the film took, but you must have spent hours going through this footage. And did you have specific footage in mind as you started going, or did you let what you found sort of guide you in what you included?
Both. I came upon a lot of material during the research process, and I gathered more or less 100 hours of material, either a video or audio. I shot a lot of extra material. For instance, I interviewed my parents, my brother also, and it was way too much. And at the beginning, I wanted to put more characters. I wanted to give more space to my parents, to my brother, to make a balanced portrait of my grandmother, because they have a lot of things to say about her also, and about the topic of gender, how they felt about me, about my grandmother, about themselves, and everything. And we narrowed it down to just the story between this grandmother and her grandson, to try to go to the very essential of it. And I got lost many times. Sometimes I was eaten by anxiety because I said, this is going to be ridiculous. People are going to make fun of me. Who am I to tell my story? What does it mean? I'm just going to get people angry in among my friends and families. Why do I tell all these stories? And finally, I think we managed also with my team, and this was a very important part of the process. My editor and my assistant, Marie-Catherine Tyler, helped me a great deal finding this distance so I would not get too emotional regarding the material. And there are a couple of sequences that I knew were going to make it into the film. For instance, when I found this black and white old film that my dad shot, there are a few excerpts in the film. I thought this would portray what he thought of a relationship between a man and a woman was back then in the early 60s. And when I found also the material that I had shot myself as a teenager, all these Western movies, all these fake news reports that I was shooting with my brother and with my neighbors at the time. I was 13 years old, 13, 14 when I did all that. And let me tell you one thing, I was shocked. 30 years later, looking at this material, I was shocked by the violence that these images contain. And basically, I thought, what do boys do? In my case, in my environment, in my social class of that time, in the early 80s, what did they do on the weekend with dad's video camera? They mimicked Westerns, they played males. And it's the main idea in every single of this film. How do we portray ourselves? We want to be tough guys. And what does that mean to be a tough guy? It means not act like a girl or not act like a homosexual. And I understood that almost every boy of this age, every teenager, every male teenager builds his identity against the identity of women and by extension by homosexuals, because homosexuals, they act like women, they're not real men, they're sissies, they're pussies, and all these terrible words. I also put a lot of words and vocabulary, insults also, how we used to describe women, what words we used to describe women or homosexuals. And these were the only words that we had at the time to gather those concepts. There were no other words. And these sequences, I thought, were quite strong. I mean, in this footage, yeah, we played the Westerns, but then also when there were no girls in the neighborhood. So when we wanted to do a girl, but of course, a girl's job is to speak cream. And she looks ridiculous or silly. Of course, we laughed a lot, and these were innocent games. But I had the feeling they were maybe not that innocent. And this is to show the audience of today, young people, but also parents now, maybe look at this, look at how kids behave, look at what we did. I can only share my own experience of how it was in my case. But I thought maybe people could learn from that and say, well, how do we build our identities? How do you position yourself when you're a 14-year-old boy? You want to be as a boy, and you have to sort of be tough and not show your sensitivity, and nobody can think you maybe could be gay. You do everything to hide it. And you don't want to be a girl because girls are weak and girls cry all the time and girls are silly. And this is what we thought. And this I found in this footage again, although they're jokes, I think they said a lot about who we are. as boys, girls, men, and women, and they say a lot about our world. And in that case, this was clear to me that it would make it into the film. And then it was an addition and many, many subtractions also of material. We edited for months and months and months and paused for many reasons, for financial reasons, but also for editorial reasons, because all of a sudden I was like, I think I forgot what I wanted to say. And I had to reflect on the work. I had to make a pause and then look at it again, and with my team. And then we found some more money and worked some more to get to this final product. I could still make some changes. I have more footage. I could, but I'm pretty happy with the result now. And you need to move on at some point. You cannot edit a film, or like Orson Welles did with his last film that he actually never finished, The Other Side of the Wind, that I just saw the other night. I had to think about this. He edited it and shot it for more than 10 years. Also, always running out of money, but also along the way, he forgot what he wanted to tell. And it's really interesting. And he never completed it. And now you can see a version of it edited by a director. It's on Netflix. It's quite interesting. But there is a point where you need to stop.
Yeah. It sounds like it gave you a lot of moments for reflection. And you also feel that you came to understand or know your grandmother in a different way than you expected through revisiting your conversations with her?
Yes. And these conversations I had with her, it was after I came out to her. I was already 27, 28 when I started this. And like I said, I wanted to record her voice, but also her memories, because she was, how do you say, the deposit, or she had all these stories in her. And the day she would pass away, she would take her stories with her. So I wanted to grab that. I wanted to have it on record. And I discovered many new ways. It's funny, when I opened up to her, she opened up in return. And I thought this was a great lesson also, because then she started telling me, and all these stories are true that I put in the film, what she told me, that her banker and her priest were gay. What I don't mention in the film, that these two gentlemen were together. There were a couple, and they were friends of my grandmother. But she never mentioned this, ever, until I came out to her. And then, all of a sudden, this story was worth telling. And she told me many other stories of her relationship with men. I did not put also every single story in the film. Some are just not relevant enough. Some are incomplete, or there are many reasons for the choices I've made. But the bottom line, if you want, is that we started to build a better relationship than we used to have. And the same goes for my parents. And my mother, this did not make it into the film, but my mother, as I was interviewing her, was telling me, Stéphane, it was really hard. We had to question ourselves when you came out to us. We did not see it coming. Also because I played comedy so well, because I was so trained to pass for a straight, and of course never give some hint that I could be gay. It was pure comedy, so they did not see it coming. But then it was a shock for them. Also, you have to remember that it was more than 25 years ago, so the social atmosphere was a little different than today. There was a lot less visibility of LGBT people, so they had no references. And this is usually the major problem with all the people that are homophobic, or that they have never been educated. They don't know, so usually you're afraid of what you don't know. And then my mother said to me, but it was a good lesson, because you showed us your true self, and then they opened up also to me. And basically she said, now we're a better family than we used to be, because we made an effort to understand somebody, you in that case, that was a little bit different. But in the end, you're still our son, we still love you. And they never retired. They never took back their love, their support. And this was a great lesson that by being honest, by opening yourself, you can actually gain people's trust, confidence, and have a better relationship. And this has worked for me in my private life, in almost every aspect with my friends. I try to be as honest as I can, and it usually pays off.
That's a perfect transition to another question regarding homophobia that was inherent in society and your surroundings and your family. But as you said, became more open and tolerant when you came out. And I also recently heard a discussion that attitudes in the US in the past 2 or 3 decades have changed because more people know someone who is openly gay. But how far do you think raising the visibility of LGBTQ individuals and the community can go in helping to overcome homophobia?
I think it's the key process. Visibility is absolutely key to me. This is how I see it. If we hide who we are, then how are other people going to recognize and acknowledge the fact that maybe we're gay or lesbian or transgender or bisexual or whatever, or pansexual? There are so many ways. And what struck me is that it seems to me that we grow up in a very rigid, in a very strict value system that divides the genders, women and men. And there are specific codes attached to every gender. And if you don't follow those codes, those rules, you're an outcast very quickly. We understand that when we're kids. You know that when you're 3 years old, 4 years old, if you're a little boy, you're not supposed to play with a doll. And if you do, instinctively, then some adult, or most of the cases it's going to be your dad, that comes and takes the doll away from you and is like, this is not a toy for little boys. It starts like that. This is maybe very cliche of what I say, but so more visibility will give more possibilities to people just to see that, oh, but he's gay too, and she's a lesbian, and she lives with a woman. And if the kids grow up knowing this and seeing just, oh, but Paul and John live in the same house and they love each other and they live together. That's enough to say. You don't have to talk about anal sex to 3 years old to make them understand that two people can love each other. And now the situation has changed. We have gay marriage in America. We have it almost all over Europe. Switzerland is the only country with Italy that still doesn't have an official recognition, but it just voted a couple of weeks ago in favor, so I think it should come now. But there are still people that feel threatened, mostly like religious people and extremist people. They have the feeling that we're taking something away from them. We're not taking anything away from them, but the belief that they had the monopoly over this. No, they do not anymore, and this has changed. The LGBT community has been powerful enough now to infiltrate, if you forgive the expression, the mainstream. And now we are recognized as a minority, yes, but a minority that is absolutely everywhere. And this is very interesting. You have gay and lesbian people all around the world, in the Black community, in the white community, in the Asian communities, in any religion, in men, women, tall, fat, not fat, all kinds. So this is something universal. This is something that you find around the globe. And finally, slowly, it is being considered as something also as a way of loving somebody else, as a possible sexuality. It's an orientation. It's there. There are some countries, I was just reading before we started our conversation, that Putin now is pushing for his new constitution, and they will have now in the constitution that marriage is only between a man and a woman. So in Russia, same-sex relationships will remain illegal and be banned for the next 50 years, probably, which is really extremely sad. the Trump administration is also dismantling the rights of transgender people and everything they can do against us. It's amazing. It's always the same process. Is these people somehow feel threatened, or they use it as they do in Poland right now. They use it as a campaign argument to go after us. We're scapegoats. It's always the same. It's either the refugees or the queers or the blacks or the Latinos, and they're disturbing. Apparently, they want their rights, but the majority, which is usually white, straight, old men, they want to remain in power, and they do everything they can to discredit us and not to get. But let's finish on a positive note. I think LGBT rights are advancing all over the world, except maybe in Hungary, in Poland, or in Russia, or in the Muslim world is very, very difficult. But still, it is unthinkable. It was unthinkable 20 years ago that now almost every European country and North America would have gay marriage. It is a fact now. And this visibility, now that we're also in the institutions, that there are more and more gay and lesbian politicians or artists that say that they're gay. But I think there's still a minority within the minority, for instance, in Hollywood or in the sports area, in basketball or in American football or in soccer in Europe. You have almost no homosexual that says he is. There's no visibility. So homophobia goes on, especially in the sports world or in many segments of society. And it is going to change for the better or for the worse. We don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do have a question about the some of the political developments recently, and maybe we can come back to that. But I wanted to pivot back to your grandmother briefly, and I found it interesting to see that she fought all her life against gender stereotypes of the time. But it seems that when she was older, she would complain about modern women acting like tomboys and not showing their femininity, which seems sort of contradictory to how she lived her life. So what do you believe, or what did you pick up on that led her to think this way?
I think my grandmother was a pioneer. She was never politically active in a party or in a movement, but she was active in her own life. She was the actress of her own destiny, and she was not allowed, as she tells in the film, to have an education, to go to school. She was destined to be married to this guy she didn't love, and she rebelled. And then she took back the control of the narration of her life, in a way. And she started to really go her way. And I think you have to remember that she was born in 1909. So she was already 10 years old after World War I. She was telling me when I was born, there was no electricity. There was sand on the street. I witnessed the first gas lamp in my street in Geneva. So just to put things into perspective. And I think she was a pioneer and she was a rebel until her limits showed up. And, you know, she was 60 years old in 69 or 63 when I was born in 72. Then when I came out to her, then in the 80s and 90s, she was already an old grandma of, more than 80 or 85 years old. I don't think you can change forever. Every one of us has his or her limits. We go as far as we can, as we're allowed legally, as we're capable of, from our personality or character or economic possibilities or whatever. But she was open. She liked being challenged, but to a certain extent. And she had very strict opinions about, about my haircut, about girls dressing up like boys, and so on and so on. She didn't like that. But she was a playful, generous personality, and she loved a lot of people. She loved me very much, and you could feel that. You could debate that with her, but then when she didn't like something, she pretended she was right, and she moved on to the next topic. So I think it's a little bit like all of us. You cannot be at the forefront of every fight. At some points, you reach your limits.
Makes sense. Coming back briefly to the political aspect of what you were discussing. So, as you said, in Switzerland, we've seen some positive political developments this year. In February, there was the successful proposal to make discrimination based on sexual identity and sexual orientation illegal, and then the moves in the past week towards marriage equality. And then in the US, here we recently had the Supreme Court ruling, and I think that it seems you view these changes positively, but the question is, will marriage equality and sort of legal and political recognition of these rights be as effective as, do they guide the social change, or does it sometimes need to be the other way around?
I do think they guide the social change, because once it's anchored in the institution, it's very difficult to take it away from us. So if now it's in the Constitution, now the Supreme Court ruled that nobody can be fired from their job in America because they're LGBT or whatever. This is a very, very important decision, because this is not going to be overturned within the next 20 years. I don't think so. Who knows what might happen? If Trump is reelected this fall, then probably there's a civil war in America. And nobody knows. And maybe there's a major economic crisis if you look at it in a very pessimistic way. And if unemployment arises now after the virus crisis by 10 or 20 or 30 more %, then when people don't have jobs anymore and when they don't have anything on their plate, well, they turn very quickly into extreme movements. And this is how fascist movements always grew. And we see that pattern all over the world. It's always the same thing. To me, it's quite clear the way it works. But I think we're, for instance, in Western Europe, very well protected now by the institutions. It can be dismantled. Also in France, we have great protection. Macron, I'm not a fan of Macron, but I mean, he's a Republican in the European way. He believes in democracy. He's a Democrat in that way, but we say républicain. He believes in the Republic. But if he's outvoted by Marine Le Pen, then Europe collapses in 2 years at the next election, and everything can go, and they're going to go against us immediately. The far right, the LGBT people, is always the target of choice. Now, my hope is, because I'm rather optimistic, but my hope is that the institutions are strong enough, and we are now strong enough. There's a bunch of us of all generations that are now out. And like I swore to myself when I came out 25 years ago, I said, never even for one day, I will go back into the closet, ever. And I kept my promise. But it meant a lot of decisions also and choices. Like, okay, I can't get that job because I'm not going to pretend I'm straight. I won't. It's on my resume, it's on my CV, it's everywhere. It's written on my head now, and with my films, I cannot never hide it anymore. But it means that I put myself at risk, in danger, if I go to countries like Iran or Saudi Arabia, where they kill gay people, they execute them every single week. They hang them, or it's terrible. It's the death penalty. We don't have to forget that. And I put my physical also health at risk. Even in Berlin, sometimes you always have to watch. But we're growing stronger and stronger and stronger. And my great hope is that the new generations, the kids now, the kids that are 12, 13, 15, 18, if they have somehow a few good teachers, now there's the media and everything, there will always be homophobic people because of religion, because of all these nasty philosophies that are circulating out there. But we have a new generation of kids. For them, it's normal to be gender fluid. They don't want to be, even gay is old fashioned. They don't want to be, they just want to be who they are. and they know that there's more than just being straight or just being gay or just being this or that. And this gives me hope. I think, like I said before, it can go either way. If you're optimistic, if the economy is playing along, if we have good politicians and not too corrupt, we can manage. If we have crazy, irrational, extreme, fascist people who govern us, then it can go down very, very quickly. And we see it in America, what a mess it is right now, with this crazy person in the White House with so much power. And we see how Germany manages with Merkel, who I'm not the biggest fan of her, but I mean, she's balanced. She's a smart person. She manages every crisis. She has the trust of the people. There is something. For instance, I feel protected as a gay person in Germany by the constitution, and I know they mean it. I feel protected by the police. I know if I have a problem, I can go to the police. When I'm in the US, and I know the United States quite well because I've lived there for 3 years of my life, I never felt protected by the police. The police is all, and I'm not even black or anything, but just I never felt protected. I was like, they're crazy. They're gonna arrest me for smoking a joint and throw me into jail or beat me up, and the same in France. They have a very tough police, and I don't feel at ease over there. And I think it's the incarnation of the government style and of the people at the top of the power chain. And we choose, or more or less, in Russia, they don't have a choice. They're going to have Putin for the life until he dies. And that guy is a monster. That guy goes after gay and lesbian people, also let them die in Chechnya and beats them up. And he doesn't do it himself, but he allows the circumstances and the atmosphere in society to go for them. The same in Poland, the same in Hungary. It's frightening. At the same time, maybe we will gain more recognition and have more freedom. And to conclude maybe about this gender rigidity I was telling about, that we grow up in a very secluded way as boys and girls, and it seems that it makes nobody happy. That not only LGBT people suffer from being isolated or not being able to play along because there is no label for them, because there's no identity, because there's no possibility, because there are no words to describe that. But the straight male, the straight, toxic, aggressive male, he feels, because I felt like that when I was a teenager, he also feels trapped. In a role, he feels that he needs to play that part in order to be accepted. And the woman, it's cliches a little bit what I say, but the woman needs to grow long hair and needs to seduce the guy and needs to become a mother. Otherwise, she feels so much pressure that she thinks she's not going to be accepted by the rest, by her family, by her community. So if we could be, and this is maybe the message of my film, if we could be a little more flexible on these notions, open up. It's like, well, it's not a big deal if you are a guy and you like a guy, or if you're bisexual, or if you want short hair. Why do we have to go after the girls that play soccer and label them as tomboys immediately, or lessies, or lesbians, or that's terrible for a little girl. Let the kids be themselves. Let everybody be who he is, who she is, or who they is, for all the trans people that are not identifying as men or women, and there are more and more. And the greatest lesson is it works. And Berlin, the city I live in, has a terrible history of fascism, as we all know. But now, in the last 30 years, the city managed to become the freest, most open city in the world, and people live here in peace. And we have Turks and Muslims and gay people and not gay people and trans people and drag queens and everything. And it works pretty well because everybody can be him or herself. And, I think that's what everybody wants in the end. but the conditions need to be reunited in order for that to be possible.
Thank you. Really important and great to hear your insight. And I just have one last question for you, which is, can you share a bit about what you're working on next and where we'll be able to see your next project?
I am right now working on my first fiction feature film. So I made a short fiction film, Prora, a couple of years ago. For those who are watching right now, Prora is Prora, and it's free access on YouTube. You just type it in and you see it. It has millions of views. It's a very successful short film, and that makes me really happy, actually, for just a little parenthesis, that it's been clicked on almost 6 million times now. And I get daily messages from teenagers from Brazil, from Mexico, from Indonesia, from Pakistan, from all over the world. I see the statistic. Now 13, 14, 15-year-old kids can have access to that, which was impossible in my generation. Internet did not exist when I was a teenager. So they have access to this information. And my next film is also going to be, it's going to be a love story. I can say that much, and it plays in the opera world. It's going to be shot between Geneva and Berlin. And it's the love story between an opera director and a dancer.
Oh, we'll be on the lookout for that for sure. Thank you so much, Stéphane, for taking the time to answer our questions and for sharing your story and your beautiful film. And I hope that more and more people have the chance to see it around the world.
Well, really happy to share this with you, and thank you, Emily, for programming the film. I'm really proud and honored that some hundreds of people, apparently, you said, were able to see it in Washington. So happy Pride, everyone. And goodbye.
And on behalf of the Embassy of Switzerland, thank you also for participating in this film club. We're already planning next month's installment, so please stay tuned to the Embassy's social media channel and our newsletter for more information. Thank you so much.